Hi, I'm Darren, and welcome to this week's weekly English practice from English Coaching Projects. This week we have a little quirky story for you, and I'm going to tell it to you from a corner, as usual. And you may wonder, what's Darren's obsession with sitting in corners? And I wouldn't blame you. But maybe it's a little thing of, safety, security, I don't know. But it's kind of related to this week's story because a guy called Jason Paget, he was a self-confessed party animal. One night when leaving a karaoke bar, he was attacked from behind and he got punched in the back of the head and it left him concussed. The next day he didn't feel too good and anything that was curved seemed pixelated, and running water from the tap, instead of looking smooth, was like full of tangent lines. And this also left him with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And he was afraid to kind of leave the house, and he'd only leave the house when he had to go and stock up on food. So he spent 3 years more or less as a recluse. He became fascinated by mathematics and he came across a web page where he was looking at fractals. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know what fractals are, and you can see in the article there's a little explanation about fractals. But it struck a chord with Jason, and Jason started to draw everything he was seeing because he felt it was the only way he could communicate what he was seeing. And he started to, carry his drawings everywhere with him. And on one rare occasion when he left the house, he was having a coffee, he was in a cafe, and there happened to be a man in the cafe who was interested in Jason's pictures, and he realized that these pictures were high-level mathematics. He asked Jason what they were, and of course Jason said that these were just the things that he was seeing. But he urged him to go back to college and to study mathematics. And that way he could explain exactly what he was seeing. But it turns out that the punch that Jason received that night after the karaoke turned him into a mathematical genius. So a little quirky story. I hope you enjoy it. And as always, there's questions for you to answer. Don't be afraid to send us your answers via email, or even record your voice and send us your answers via WhatsApp. Bye bye. The punch that turned a man into a maths genius. Imagine getting punched and waking up the next day a mathematical genius. Well, that is literally what happened to Jason Paget. EC coach Darren tells us more. Jason Paget sees maths everywhere. Jason is so obsessed with maths and understands such complex concepts, he's been called a genius. But he hasn't always had a way with numbers. Just under 17 years ago, he was living a very different life. He was a very shallow person whose life rotated around girls, partying and drinking. He had no interest in maths whatsoever. But one night everything changed. While out with friends, Jason was attacked and received a punch to the back of his head which left him concussed. The next day, Jason's behaviour changed dramatically. He had sustained a traumatic brain injury which brought on obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. Jason became irrationally afraid of germs, and he became increasingly afraid of the outside world and would only leave his house to stock up on food. But while Jason was experiencing all these negative consequences from his attack, something incredible was happening too. The way he was seeing things changed. Everything that was curved looked like it was slightly pixelated, he explains. Water coming down the drain didn't look like it was a smooth, flowing thing anymore. It looked like these little tangent lines. The same thing happened with clouds, sunlight streaming between trees and puddles. To Jason, the world essentially looked like a retro video game. Because of these visions, he began to think about huge questions in relation to mathematics and physics. He stumbled across a webpage about fractals which struck a chord with him. It's a difficult mathematical concept, which, put at its most basic, can be likened to a snowflake. When you zoom in, you will see it's made up of smaller snowflakes connected together. Zoom in again, and those snowflakes are made of smaller snowflakes, and so on until infinity. He began to draw everything, as it was the only way he could manage to communicate effectively what he was seeing. While on a rare trip out one day, he was approached by a man who had noticed Jason with his drawings and told him they looked mathematical. It turned out the man was a physicist and recognized the high-level mathematics Jason was drawing. He urged him to take a maths class, which led Jason to enroll in a community college, where he began to learn the language he needed to describe his obsession. But why was he seeing things in such a strange and different way? Why was his world now comprised of geometrical shapes and graphs? It was found that Jason had access to parts of the brain that we don't normally have conscious access to. And also, the visual cortex was working in conjunction with the part of the brain that does mathematics. Jason was formally diagnosed with acquired Savant syndrome and a form of synesthesia. Since his diagnosis, he has published a book about his experience called Struck by Genius and has toured the world telling people his story and educating them about maths. This week's questions are: what is or was your best and worst subject at school? Do you feel you have or had enough time to develop your interests or strengths at school? Do you believe more time should be spent on mathematics at school? What for you is a sign of an intelligent person? If you were to improve in one area of intelligence, what would it be and why? What courses have you enrolled in recent years?